Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I would like to continue talking about my current project of coding the combat system for a viewer's game. In particular, I'd like to talk about what I've done in relation to the ability of player characters to issue orders to companions, and if those orders are accepted, to have the companions act differently based on which order they've received. In particular, we are coding the charge order. There are 4 different orders, and each of them basically has to be coded separately because they have a different effect on the companion's behavior, and I've coded a little more about that. There aren't any new variables, but I have changed a variable. I had a variable called order, which was which order a given companion has received, if any. And I decided that it made more sense to me, instead of having a separate array for that, I thought it would make more sense to add a new slot to the com array. Com, of course, stands for companion, and it's a 2-dimensional array. The first number being which companion we're talking about, and then we have various slots that deal with different aspects of that companion. So what persona they are, which is character class, what hit points, how far they are from the player character in the current combat, their gender, and we've got a new one, which is $com $Z5. This replaces the order array, and the comment here says it's 0 or undefined if this companion will behave in the default way, or it's over 0 if they will act according to an order, as per $order name, which is the array with the, as you would expect from the name of the variable, the names of the different orders, which are charge, cover me, fallback, and regroup. Charge being the one that we're currently coding. So all of the references to the $order array, it now uses $com, the name of the companion in question, or excuse me, the number of the companion in question, and then slot 5. Functionally, it's exactly the same in terms of what the user will experience. It's precisely the same. I just thought it was a little bit neater to group everything to do with the companions in one variable, rather than having sort of some of them grouped there and then have a separate variable for one particular thing. So we have some new pages, or we have a new page, which is charge move, and that's mostly what we're going to look at today. So we've seen how in this page, companion, and I'll just zoom in so the text is a little easier to read. In this page, the companion will stand up if they are prone, if they've been knocked over. Otherwise, if they are subject to order number 1, in other words, if they've been told to charge by the player character and that attempt to order them to do something has been successful, they will go to a special page for charge. There will be other special pages for the other orders, but we've only just started coding that, so there aren't any yet. And if that's not the case, there was a whole bunch of code down here, but I have moved it to its own passage. Sorry, I keep saying pages. This is an ongoing thing. I keep saying pages. I keep calling each of these things a different page. Actually, they're officially called passages. So yeah, sorry about that. That's not a real terminology. It's just a mistake that I keep making. So if I say page again, which I probably will, it means passages. So yeah, we had a whole bunch of code down here. We've moved it to companion default. And the reason that we've moved it to companion default, where is that? It's over here. The pages are also in not in particularly good order. I do have to take some time. As you can see, the arrows are sort of going all over the place, which is a bit inevitable, but it could be it could be better. It could be made more logical. So I do have to do that at some stage. Anyway, the reason we have companion default, the default behavior, in a separate passage is that if we go here, we might end up wanting to do the default behavior anyway. And the reason for that is the charge order says find an enemy who is not hovering, and if there's one such enemy within hand-to-hand range, attack them hand-to-hand. And if there isn't any within hand-to-hand range, but there are some sort of out of that range, then move towards the closest one of those enemies. And it could well be that there aren't any enemies that aren't hovering. In other words, all of the enemies have still got the hovering tag, which most enemies do at the beginning of the combat, until they're, in fact, and they keep it until they're damaged. And in that case, what does the companion do? Well, I've decided it just obeys, it just defaults to the default behavior. And so we want to have the ability to use this same code, and so we put it in a separate passage, and then we can use it with an include. So let's have a look at what I've done with the charge. I won't show you the default code because we've gone through it before. It's exactly the same. It's just that it used to be here, and it's now in its own passage. So let's have a look at the charge passage. As I've talked about, we find where's the closest non-hovering enemy, and if there isn't one, which we will know if Z has a value of 100, we'll know that there aren't any. We give a little message, there are no non-hovering enemies for this companion to charge, so the companion will follow default behavior with a couple of line breaks, and then we include companion default. We include this new page there. So the fact, in that particular case, the fact that they've been told to charge doesn't have any effect on their behavior, at least not this action. Otherwise, we have a message. All of these messages are for testing only. I would imagine that you probably wouldn't have so many messages in the final game, but I would have to speak to the person whose game this is to sort that out. But I'm putting as many messages as possible because that makes it easy for me when I'm testing, and for you when you're looking at the code to see what's happening. So it says the nearest non-hovering enemy is Z range bands away, so it might be 0, 1, or 2, or 3. And the important difference there is how far away is the nearest non-hovering enemy. If it's 0 or 1, we can attack them. And if it's greater than 1, we have to move towards them. Well, as you can see, the option to attack them is not yet done. I've just got a message to myself that explains what's happening. Pick an enemy who is 0 or 1 range bands away and attack them with a hand-to-hand attack. In other words, an attack whose range is listed as 0, which is how we're listing close range attacks in the array to do with weapons. But the thing that I have coded is this other option, which is if Z is greater than 1. Then we go to this new passage, charge move. And I've said not done, and that's not right, so I'll fix that. Sorry. Of course, I did that, and I did that as a note to myself. Then I did the code, and I forgot to get rid of the not done. So I'll fix that in the version that I upload to itch.io. So there's a note that says pick an enemy exactly Z range bands away and move towards them. So this is very similar to how we pick an enemy in the default behavior. And it's similar enough that it sort of feels like we should be able to, instead of what we've got here is we've got sort of separate code. It feels like we should be able to have one bit of code and access that one bit of code from the two passages rather than duplicating the code. But I haven't sort of sat down and worked out how to do that yet. But yeah, it sort of feels like it feels like it should be possible to do that. But it was just easier for now to just sort of essentially write the code again. So if you're noticing a similarity, yes, that's correct. It is very similar. It does feel like we should be able to have a single bit of code. Anyway, so we choose a random number from 1 to NME underscore max, which is the maximum number of enemies that there can be in a given combat. We ask ourselves, are there hit points greater than 0? That's what's stored in NME Y2. If so, we're going to do a few different things, but I'll go down to the else because that's simpler. If not, well, that's an enemy that's either dead or they were never in the combat to start with. It's just a slot that isn't used in this particular combat. So in either case, that's not a good pick and we have to pick again. So we just include charge move. In other words, we go back to the top of the page and pick another one. But if they are a living enemy, they have hit points greater than 0, then we work out the distance between the current companion and the enemy that we've chosen. And that's math.abs, which is the absolute value, meaning if it's negative, multiply it by -1. And it's NME Y3, which is where the position of the enemies goes, minus com I and I who 3, and that is where the companion's distance is stored. I and I underscore who is just who currently has the initiative. In this case, of course, it's a companion, because if we end up at this passage, we can only end up at this passage when a companion is acting. And then we ask ourselves, is the distance between these two, the absolute value of one minus the other, is that exactly equal to z? If it is, we're going to do some complicated stuff. But again, I'll look at the else one first because it's simpler. If not, well, we've picked an enemy. We've picked a real enemy, an existing living enemy, but they're too far away, and we want to pick we want to pick the closest enemy, or if there's more than one of the closest enemies. So we do the same thing that we did down here. We just include charge move. Okay, so let's say then that it does equal z. Well, that means we've picked one of the enemies that we want to pick, someone who's exactly z range bands away. We give the message companion I and I underscore who, so it'll be companion 2 or companion 1, moves towards enemy y. Toward enemy y, a couple of line breaks. And then we're going to either subtract 1 from com I and I who 3, which is where, as I said, where the distance is stored of the companion, or we're going to add 1. And which one we do depends on which is higher between enemy y3 and com I and I who 3. There always will be one who's higher, because remember, we're looking for one that's exactly z range bands away, and also remember, z is greater than 1. We don't end up at this passage unless z is greater than 1. So the distance has to be at least 2, which means that they can't be the same. So I've made a little note to that effect there. If the enemy's position is less than the companion's position, in other words, let's say, for example, the enemy's in position 2 and the companion's in position 4, in that case, we subtract 1 from the companion's position. So the enemy's at 2, companion's at 4, the enemy moves to 3. And if otherwise, we add 1. So let's say the enemy's at 4, the companion's at 0, well, the companion then moves to 1. And having done that, we set print underscore distance equal to 1, or sorry, print underscore dist equal to 1. That is the print distances. It's the code that it's the variable that tells the computer, I want you to print out a little description of where everyone is. So we say distance 4, and it's got all the enemies at distance 4, distance 3, there's this, distance 2, etc. So we set that to to 1, so we know that happens, and then we have a button that we press to continue, and it takes us to next action. So the this companion will have their next action, or if that was their last action, it'll be the next character, or if all characters have gone, we re-roll initiative and see who gets to move that way. And that is moving. So the next thing we need to do is this one here, which is we have to choose an enemy that is within hand-to-hand range. And if we get here, we know there is such an enemy. We pick one, and then we have to attack them with a hand-to-hand attack for the chosen weapon. I think there might be some weapons that don't have hand-to-hand attacks, so that won't come up at the moment because we've got all the characters have pistols, and pistols do have a hand-to-hand attack. But of course, it's possible that it could happen in the actual game, and so therefore we need to code for that. But if they do have a hand-to-hand attack, they need to use that one. And if they have multiple hand-to-hand attacks, which some weapons do, or at least one weapon does, then they need to sort of pick one randomly. And as I said, it feels like the code could be tightened up a bit by this picking out of an enemy. It does feel like we could have a single bit of code that covers this and the equivalent code in the default behavior, but we'll see. I would also like to have another go at arranging this a bit more logically, because at the moment it's a bit all over the place. After we've done that, of course, we have to start looking at the other orders, and then there's other things to do beyond that. But for now, I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.